Hey everyone, today I'm going to be showing you guys how to identify tulip trees. There are two species in the genus that we're going to be talking about today, namely Liriodendron. There's a very common species that probably is the one that you will be seeing, and then there's a more rare species that is native to China, and so I'm going to show you guys how to identify both of them and how to distinguish between them. It's a very easy tree to identify. There's not many lookalikes, and it's a very distinguishable leaf. You can see these leaves from far away, and these trees are pretty cool. They're the tallest eastern hardwoods, so they really grow straight and kind of dominate the canopy in some of the eastern forests, especially in my region in the Philadelphia area. So they're a pretty common tree. They grow really tall, and they are a good wood. They're used for building and things like that. There's two species of tulip trees, two known species of tulip trees, or Liriodendron. There's a very common one called Liriodendron tulipifera, and a more rare species called Liriodendron chinense. So if we first look at Liriodendron chinense, you'll notice that the leaf is kind of more lobed. In here it has these two kind of lobes, and new leaves have a purplish tint. So Liriodendron chinense is native to China. It's found in a bunch of provinces in China and as well as northern Vietnam. However, it is a common, not a common, but not unheard of, I guess. It's cultivated in European countries, in the Americas as well. So it is not rare to find one, I guess, planted by, maybe an arboretum or something like that. You could find this in North America, pretty much. So if you see purple leaves or purplish tint like you see in this leaf here on new growth, then it's pretty much a giveaway for Liriodendron chinense. Otherwise, the species look very, very similar. Liriodendron tulipifera is supposed to be less lobed than Liriodendron chinense, like this. This is kind of the classic leaf shape of the tulip tree. It has a kind of cat-shaped leaf that kind of looks like the face of a cat. Here's a good example of that. It kind of looks like a cat with its ears and whiskers and things like that. So it's supposed to be less lobed. But as we'll see, it's very common to see lobed leaves like this. This kind of looks more like the Liriodendron chinense, but it's not purple. So actually, Liriodendron chinense and Liriodendron tulipifera can hybridize somewhat readily. So if there's like a planted chinense tree nearby, and it can pretty much hybridize with tulipifera and produce kind of like intermediate phenotypes where we see kind of lobed leaves, green tints, no purplish tints. So it's sometimes argued that there's really only one species of tulip tree, but it probably doesn't matter for you guys. You probably won't have to identify it to the species level. But regardless, we're going to pretty much look for this very distinct looking leaf. It's very easy to identify, like I said, and they're usually tall, straight growing hardwood trees, and they're pretty easy to identify. So that's Liriodendron chinense. Here's what the flower looks like for both of the trees. They look a little bit different in chinense, but it's still the same color. It's just maybe a little bit smaller, more compact. So they have, yellow, orange, and green colors. A pretty distinct kind of cup-looking flower, and they're actually very sweet. You can actually taste the nectar out of some of these, and they're very, very sweet when they're flowering. There's like a week or two span where they produce this really sweet nectar, and you can actually like just kind of drink the nectar out of the leaf or scrape it out with your finger. It's actually really good. So you'll be able to see these these flowers kind of stand out against the dark green leaves, and when they flower, they're pretty beautiful. They're commonly planted popular trees. So that's what the flower looks like. So after it flowers and it's been fertilized, it fruits, and this is kind of what the fruit looks like. It fruits around this female part, I think, in this middle of the flower, and that's pretty much what you see in the fruiting body. It kind of looks like this. Everything else kind of falls off. This gets a little bit bigger, and then eventually over winter you can see you'll see nothing. Like, obviously the leaves will fall off. You'll see kind of just this is what you'll see in the winter, where it's just the seed pods on the tree, and they fall off and they produce hundreds and thousands of seeds. They produce a ton of seeds, and you'll probably see a lot of little tulip poplar seedlings popping up. Each of these is a little seed. The seed is in here. This is more so for wind dispersal, and this whole thing is referred to as a samara. And you'll find the samaras on the leaves on the tree during the winter. They always kind of point up. They curve up and like point up like this one here. So it's a pretty easy tree to identify even in the winter. Here's again the fruiting body of the tulip tree, and then like I said, very easy to identify in the winter because you'll see these samaras. The bark is a little distinct as well. There are a few species of ash that look kind of similar, so unless I would make sure, like if you're trying to identify this tree in the winter, you would kind of look for this kind of pattern here. Again, the tree grows straight up. It grows large, straight up and tall, so sometimes it has two main trunks, and but you'll look for this kind of diamond shape. You'll see like kind of diamonds in the bark. Like I said, there are some species of ash that look like this, so make sure you can, if you see this kind of looking bark, make sure to look up and try to find some samaras if you're trying to identify this in the winter. That's what the bark looks like on a mature tree. It takes a while to get there. This probably is like probably a tree that's maybe 20 years old or so, maybe a little bit younger. The bark looks different obviously when it's younger, and then it kind of matures into the diamond shaped ridged kind of bark that I showed. So yeah, this is the ash of a white this is the bark of a white ash tree, so it kind of looks pretty similar, like I said, so just kind of be careful when trying to identify them based on bark alone. Alright, so now that we have the basics set up, I just wanted to kind of walk through and identify some of these on iNaturalist. Again, this is a classic example of a tulip tree leaf. This one looks like it's been planted on the street. It's a somewhat common street tree, so if there's a good amount of space, they'll plant tulip trees sometimes, and there's a bunch of different cultivars that make the tree smaller or make it columnar and grow in certain ways. So this is definitely a tulip tree here. This is the fruiting body of a tulip tree as well, as I mentioned. Again, even though we have a very lobed looking leaf here that is kind of reminiscent of chinense, we don't see any purplish tint to new growth, and leaf shape does vary considerably within this genus. Even within the same plant, you'll see like fully lobed leaves like this, and then you'll see regular leaves. So it's pretty interesting how that works out. But I pretty much mark these as Liriodendron tulipifera, the American tulip tree, unless I see some purplish tint, where that I'll mark as chinense. So again, we won't really see that too often in North America and even in Europe and things like that. Here's what a little seedling looks like. For this example, we would need to see, in this case, the leaves. It's hard to identify with just the bark. It does look like a tulip tree bark, but again, it could be an ash or something like that, so I won't identify that one. This is kind of what the seed pod or the samara looks like. I don't think this was quite finished fruiting or producing the seeds, but that's what it looks like. They often fall off the tree. Flowers even fall off the tree too. They're kind of messy sometimes. A lot of things fall off and somewhat readily. Alright, so in this last example, the canopy is usually pretty high up, so sometimes it's hard to get a picture of the leaf, but we can see against the blue sky here the kind of signature looking leaf shape for this tree, and we can identify that based on this picture. So lastly, I'm going to show you guys a plant that is commonly or somewhat regularly confused with the tulip tree, called sassafras or Sassafras albinum. So sassafras is variable. It can have three kind of protrusions here. It can have two, or it can have one. This is not a good example of that. Let's see if we can find one here. Okay, this one we can kind of see it. So here's a leaf with three lobes, and then here's one with two. It kind of has this like oven mitt looking shape, and then here's just one kind of lobe leaf. So this is commonly confused with a tulip tree sometimes based on the angle, but if you look closely, they don't really look alike at all. Maybe sometimes, I guess, based on what angle the photograph is coming from, it might get confusing, but as long as you kind of look for the 3 distinct leaf shapes for sassafras, you can rule that out for considering that tree as a tulip tree. So hope you guys enjoyed the video, hope you learned something, and thanks for watching.